some people may have gained a perception of how the society has been wrecked. But I interrupt you here to something that came to mind that I was mentioning before the show, and you can expand on it. We have been told, or at least all of us in the United States, that the reason for attacking Afghanistan almost 10 years ago now
Yes.
was to fight Al-Qaeda, or you pronounce it in a different way,
Yes.
Operatives who were working out of Afghanistan.
Yes.
And in a recent write-up, which I saw in two different newspapers, both and European and local, it would appear there are about 100 Al-Qaeda people in Afghanistan.
Right, right.
And I was comparing 30,000 soldiers have been sent additional, and you were mentioning the numbers that you want to mention, which you may wish to say again, because I don't remember. So you have this huge army dispatched, allegedly, to capture 100 people.
Capture or eliminate or dismantle.
To kill them.
Obama would put it.
Plus you have the drones and these huge airplanes that when bombed they can kill thousands.
Yeah.
So it would seem it would be interesting to our viewers to find, to have an explanation if the Al-Qaeda was the reason seems not to be there, because 100 people should be fairly easy to find.
Yes.
Or if they are not easy to find, will probably easy to render them ineffective.
Right, right.
So so now there are the Taliban. You know, Howard Zinn, who regrettably died so recently, used to call the United States of amnesia.
Yes.
And probably by now, in the collective consciousness, the term Al-Qaeda and the Taliban is shifted to Taliban.
Right,
so you don't need to think too much about it. Taliban must be a terrorist, even if he has technically nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. For the benefit of our viewers who may be as confused as I can be when you hear these things, can you give us a bit of historical perspective of the change between Al-Qaeda, or rather of the migration of the idea from Al-Qaeda to the Taliban, and what happened in between?
Yes. I think this is very important because, you know, it has been 10 years since 9/11, and, you know, a lot of our younger people may not even know the origins of this conflict between Afghanistan and the United States. We need to remind our viewers that after the 19 hijackers who hijacked the planes and then bombed, you know, the Pentagon and the World Trade Center, and one of the planes crashing in Pennsylvania, there were no Afghans. The Afghans, in fact, had nothing to do with 9/11. What happened was the United States created the first generation, the Mujahideen, brought people from all over the world, including bin Laden. Bin Laden initially, as we know, was recruited and invited by the CIA and Washington to come join the jihad, or the struggle against the Soviet occupation in Afghanistan. So the United States itself recruited, armed, funded, protected, etc., supported the Mujahideen who fought the Soviet Union. Bin Laden was a part. He and his followers from the Arab countries were a part of that recruitment and training program. And then, of course, bin Laden developed his own idea. He didn't like the United States, in essence, occupying his country, Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states. And so he developed a program to eject the United States from Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, but also he did not like the U.S. support for Israel and what the Israelis were doing to the Palestinians. And of course, a lot of Muslims sort of put these things together. They would say, look, you know, it's the West in a way waging war on different Muslim countries, whether it's in a way Palestine, you know, Somalia, you know, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Iran, perhaps, and so forth. So people have a reason. My point is that the Afghans, including the Taliban, really didn't have much to do with hardly anything with 9/11, but also the decision to attack Afghanistan and eject the Taliban from power was made months before the 9/11. That decision was made in the summer, and you know, and many people know about this. So that's one thing we need to remember. The other is that, in a way, And there seems to be credible evidence now that the Taliban themselves, when they were in power from 1994 to 94 to 2001, they did not know bin Laden's plan to attack the United States. In a way, the Qaeda sort of hijacked the country, Afghanistan, from Taliban and had their own global agenda. So the Qaeda are international, mostly Arabs and some other people. There were obviously people in Virginia, you know, these 5 Pakistanis, you know, who were raised and went to school in Virginia and now are being interrogated in Pakistan. But now we know that the Taliban, they're on record. They want to dissociate themselves from the Qaeda. They don't want to have anything to do with the Qaeda. They do not have any global agenda. And the Taliban keep saying, Mullah Omar and other people keep saying, we have nothing against the Americans or the West. We have nothing against the U.S. government. And we will not allow Afghanistan to be used as a base by anybody to attack and harm other people, which is to say they're saying, we don't want to have anything to do with the Qaeda because, in a way, the Qaeda is responsible for the ejection of the Taliban from power. So they're very, very separate. And I think it is important that those 19 people were Arabs, mostly Saudis, who learned their craft in Florida. They learned how to fly the planes in Florida, you know, and hatch the planes in Spain and also in Germany, the Middle East, Germany, and other places. So, but now here we are, you know, the United States waging this war, but not the war is not just on the Taliban now. It's also on a whole country. I mean, right now there's a massive, multifaceted war being waged on Afghanistan.
It would be interesting for the viewers again to know who are they fighting now? Because who is fighting whom?
Well, right now we have more than 100,000 troops, mostly from the United States, but also from 42, 43 other countries. Some of these countries, like Albania, may have 5 or 6 people, but there are 100,000 troops, and there will be another 50,000. But also, many Americans don't know that there's also a shadow army of contractors, more than 100,000 contractors. Most of them are Afghans. Some of them, about 15,000, are third nations, and then 15,000 or so are the Americans, like, say, Blackwater or DynCorp or Armed Group North America, these companies who do everything from loading those drones to bomb, you know, Afghan villages and Pakistani villages, to providing protection and so forth. So the war now is NATO, the United States, both its real and shadow army, waging, in a way, war on everybody, not just the Taliban, because it's the Russian commentators would say it's very difficult to separate the Taliban from, say, normal people, because the Taliban and the Pashtun are one and the same. And I think the other point that many people don't quite know is that there was a civil war underway in 2001 before the United States arrived. There was a civil war in Afghanistan between essentially the Pashtun Taliban on the one hand and the Northern Alliance, which is an alliance of the other groups, Tajiks, Uzbeks, Hazaras, and Turkmens, on the other hand. And the United States injected itself into the civil war on behalf of the minority groups to fight the Taliban, i.e. the Pashtuns. And this civil war is now fought in a different way, but that's essentially what is taking place.
And as you were saying last time, the Pashtun being the majority, or
many people say there are at least more than half of the majority, a little more than half, yes.
Yeah, being the majority of it.
Yes.
Essentially, it's a form of massive ethnic cleansing.